I want to start, obviously, at the beginning. Where did your love of space come from? It runs through your life from a very early age. But tell us about the beginnings.
Yeah, I was 7 years old in May of 1961. Just before my 7th birthday, when Alan Shepard lifted off to go into space. And of course, that was back in the day of the black and white television. And you know, if you were really affluent, your TV was about this big. So a really small screen, grainy images and things, but an absolutely unbelievable experience watching Alan Shepard lift off to go into space. Even though it was a 15-minute suborbital flight, that captured my imagination. I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to explore space and become an astronaut.
And you and your dad had a conversation about that not long after, about whether there were any Canadian astronauts. And at that time, Zippo, right?
Yeah, it didn't seem optimistic. In fact, I chatted with my parents about it. And of course, you know, when you go into school and the teachers ask you, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, well, I want to be an astronaut. And I was told by everybody that that was impossible because Canada in those days did not have an astronaut program. Nowadays, we do have an astronaut program, and there's tremendous opportunity. I think we have a couple people in the audience who might be interested in becoming astronauts. And there's tremendous opportunities. You could fly as a government astronaut, or you could fly potentially as a commercial astronaut, which of course didn't exist back in the 60s either.
Mm-hmm. Now, the journey that you took from wanting to be an astronaut was not a straight journey. Would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely.
And okay, so I'm not going to pinpoint some of the failures, many failures, that Dave talks about in the books, but I'll mention a couple. You blew up a few model airplanes.
Yeah.
You almost died in a sort of a few different ways. Riding your bike. You had a rough beginning to your career at McGill. I'll stop. But what I want to ask you is how important is failure in your success story?
You know, in all sincerity, and you're totally correct, I've had more than my share of interesting experiences, shall we say, adverse circumstances. It's really what you do when you don't succeed that determines whether you will succeed. And it took me a while to figure that out. I had some pretty tough times, particularly when I was in university, and I was trying to work to be able to afford tuition and pay to live in an apartment and things. So this is back in 1976. I remember living in an apartment, and it was $60 a month for my rent, which in those days was actually a lot of money and things. But anyway, to get to my apartment, you had to go up Drummond Street in Montreal and turn right in the first alley, turn left in the next alley, walk halfway down that alley, turn left in another alley, and there was the door to my apartment. You can imagine having guests over. It was really kind of very impressive, especially the first time I invited my parents to come see me and things. But in that one bedroom apartment, I thought, wow, you know, I'm going to have to get my act together and figure this out, because it seemed at that time the possibility of flying in space was virtually impossible.
Had you given up on it at that point? Like, did you sort of, you describe a scene in the book where you're literally lying on your bed going, is this where my life is heading?
Yeah.
Had you given up on those dreams?
I hadn't given up on it. It was definitely on the back burner, because, you know, it seemed almost insurmountable to be able to get through the realities of paying my tuition and staying in university, being able to get good marks. And I know you guys are going to laugh about this, but it took me a while. I was a little slow. It took me a while to figure out that if I studied as hard as I was working, I could actually quit my 3 jobs, study hard, get scholarships to pay my tuition. It took me 3 years to figure that one out. And then I went, oh, you know what? If I just switched what I'm working on, then all of a sudden I might be able to succeed. So I did that, and then all of a sudden things began to fall in place.
Are people surprised? I will admit to a certain element of surprise, but are people surprised when you tell them that there isn't this kind of, I was the best at school, I was the best at this? You think about astronauts, you guys are like, I was the best at every stage, and they picked me out of a lineup and said, you young man.
That may apply to other people. It didn't necessarily apply to me. You know, if you asked some of my teachers in elementary school who was going to be the astronaut in the class, I'm not sure they would have said, oh, that guy over there. Yeah. But you know what? To me, it illustrates the power of passion and believing in yourself. And there was one thing that I did kind of continue to believe no matter what, and that was that I'd have a chance to do something meaningful with my life. So I dreamt of becoming a doctor, I dreamt of becoming an astronaut. The astronaut thing I put on the back burner when I was an undergraduate, and then really focused on becoming a doctor. And the astronaut did not surface until 1983. when Canada hired its first group of astronauts, it was a big wake-up call going, wow, that childhood dream that I had, I might actually be able to pull this off. So I missed that application. I was busy studying for my final exams in med school at the time, but I knew that the door was now open. So I was just waiting until 1992, the second time we had a selection in Canada. I actually got my application in ahead of time because I was down at an event in Florida with my wife, who's a pilot for Air Canada. One of the US female astronauts was speaking, and she said, oh, I hear Canada's hiring next year. And I said, no, really? So I sent in my CV. Of course, the Canadian Space Agency said, no, we're not hiring astronauts. But anyway, turns out they really were. And
you had sent them your resume anyway, right?
I sent it in, yeah. There was an ad in the newspaper, you're going to laugh about this, but January of 1992, there's an ad in the Globe and Mail. Want to be an astronaut? And like, who would not send in their CV? Of course I want. So I sent in my CV. There were like 5,300 plus people that sent in their CV. The really cool part about that story, 600 applications from kids less than 10 years of age. Gotta love it, right? It's a good thing.
That's fantastic. Yeah. You talk about when you were, you had to make some sacrifices. Obviously, you put some things on the back burner in order to get your career, your academic career back going. How important are sacrifices? And it wasn't just that you gave up on your dream and found it again. You had a plan. You decided you had to make up a plan in order to achieve your goals. So
yeah.
How important was sacrifice in your life or in anyone's life if they want to hit that?
I think anything that's worth doing, and it's important to realize that we ourselves define what is worth doing. So what may be worth doing for me may be totally different for you, and that's all good. But in my experience, anything that's truly worth doing is generally not easy, and it requires a lot of hard work. And hard work means that you're going to sacrifice some things at times, and it's tough. I remember being in medical school. I'd go to the library Saturday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning when the library opened, and I'd leave at midnight. And I talk about it in the book of being in the library Saturday night. How many people are in the library Saturday night at 10 o'clock at night, right? You count them on one hand. But for me, that's the level of commitment that was required to be able to succeed. I don't regret it at all. I think that there are phases in life where sometimes we work a lot harder than we work in other times. And by setting myself up by working hard for success, that really created the conditions and enabled me to become an astronaut.
One of the things that was in the back of my mind when I was reading your book was something that comes up a lot with parenting today. The idea that we don't really have maybe our level of allowable risk for our children has changed. I don't know if I don't necessarily want to be like two old men on those damn kids today, they don't know what risk is about. But the level of risk and danger that you were in, and maybe even the amount that your parents sort of let you run wild. How important was that in your upbringing and almost letting you make those mistakes?
Personally, I think it's really important. I did learn something very important. Don't tell your parents you're going to go skydiving until after you've actually gone skydiving. It generally works a little bit better that way in terms of getting it across, and you sort of say, oh, I've already done it. But anyway, I do think it's really important. Our daughter is 21 and she's doing her private pilot's license right now. My wife and I are both pilots. My wife flies for Air Canada. She flies 787s. And you can imagine, both of us are standing on the ground as Olivia's soloing, and we're looking going, okay, I hope this all works out. And of course, her landing was spectacular and things. But I think it's hard for parents because, you understand the element of risk, but you do want to encourage, I think, your kids to grow up to be able to understand how to be resilient, how to understand to manage risk. And the only way to do that is to allow gradual exposure to risk. You touched on it. I mean, I almost died a couple of times. I was hit by a car when I was a kid. I did look both ways. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But I guess one of the looks must have been too abbreviated. I never even saw the car. It came out of the left field, slammed into me. I was thrown, and fortunately not injured and things. But I did learn a lot about looking both ways and looking carefully both ways from that enterprise. And then a few years after that, I was an Army cadet, and I was up in Valcartier as a summer cadet program, and we were in a Deuce and a Half. It's a troop transport. We're driving back from a 21-mile forced march, and they rolled the transport. The driver lost control and it actually rolled upside down. I remember holding onto the seat like this, and I was going backwards. So I'm holding onto the seat like this, thinking I'm going to be able to hold myself in place. That didn't quite work. And the next thing I knew, there's a cloud of dust everywhere, and my ears are ringing. There's blood on my head and my shoulder, and people are screaming and yelling and stuff. And I was very fortunate. I survived that experience. So you never know what's going to happen in life. And I just think that we need to be able to manage risk and understand that life is associated with some element of risk, but enjoy it to the fullest because it's an amazing experience.
There's a line in the book you use where you say, it's a good day to be alive. I think that's the right, and that comes from that as well, right?
Yeah, it does. General Howell was an active duty Marine general, and he was the head of Johnson Space Center. I worked for him. He was the director of the center. I was director of life sciences. And I had the pleasure of working with him. And he would start every meeting by saying, you know what, it's a great day to be alive in Houston. And when you've been in harm's way, if something has happened to you that was potentially risky, you understand the benefit of that statement, that, you know what, it's a great day to be here with all of you guys tonight. It's a great day. And often we don't think about that. We just say, hey, I'm going to the library tonight. We're going to hear this author talk about a book, and it's going to be really cool. But you know what? It's really cool just to be here. And as an emergency physician, I can tell you, I've seen many, many people who aren't with us anymore. And the fact that we're all here and able to enjoy this experience tonight is an amazing opportunity. So yeah, it's a great day to be alive in Toronto.
Yeah. You guys agree? Yeah. Okay, good. That's good. There we go. You mentioned the troop carrier rolling over. There's an interesting little thing you didn't mention, which I thought was kind of key to that story, which is that you had remembered to pack your first aid kit, right? And part of that was because of your mom. Can you talk a little bit about how important your mom was in you becoming a doctor, really?
So I think my mother really wanted to be a surgeon. She ended up as an operating room nurse. She trained as a nurse in the late 1930s, early 1940s, and actually worked down in New York City during World War II, and then came back to work in Toronto at Women's College Hospital and things. But as a kid growing up, she supported our passion for learning. You know, the kitchen table would go from being the kitchen table into being a laboratory, and she would teach me how to give intramuscular injections and things. I think I was the only kid on the block that knew how to tie a single-handed surgical knot at age 13. But anyway, she was really, really passionate. You guys
dissected like a cow's heart or something.
We did the cow's heart. We did frogs. We did earthworms. You know, whatever you could find dead on the road outside, we dissect and stuff. And you learn a lot about that. But
it must have been fun coming over for dinner at your house.
It was very entertaining. Yeah. Yeah, but she was really good about teaching us the importance of first aid. And I remember distinctly the beginning of that day that we were going on the forced march. It was kind of like a day like today. It was a beautiful, blue, sunny day. And you know, you get the order that you have to bring your poncho. And poncho? Like, really? Haven't you guys looked at the sky up there? It's, you know, blue. There's not a cloud. So, you know, with the wisdom of 13-year-old weather forecasters and things, anyway, I stuck the poncho in my thing. But I also brought my first aid kit with me, and it turns out that after the accident, I was the only one with a first aid kit. And we, needless to say, used the total contents of the first aid kit on myself and all the other people who were on board the vehicle.
The intertwining of your medical life and your life as an astronaut, I feel like we've been talking more about the medicine, but they're so intertwined.
Yeah.
I wanted you to tell a story. It's central in the book, but I think it has a lot to do with who you are. You've just gone through training, you're about to go to space for the very first time, and you're under quarantine. You are not supposed to go near anybody, and then one night you get a knock on your door. Tell us what happens.
Yeah, so I was sitting at the kitchen table, and the funny part, this is the kitchen table where everything happened. I was studying for exams. The Krebs cycle is permanently imprinted on the surface of the kitchen table because I used to write it all out and stuff. So there's a lot of history there. So I'm sitting there in jeans and a t-shirt studying the Space Shuttle Crew Operator's Manual. It's essentially how to drive the space shuttle. And the book is about this thick. So anyway, I'm studying, and the doorbell rings. So I get up, you know, and Kathy was out with Evan, so I'm basically at home. And I go to the door, and there's this person who's quite agitated, standing there and says, "Do you know CPR?" And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think this is a survey from the American Heart Association, right? I said, "Yes, I'm actually an emergency doctor. Why do you need to know?" And they said, "Well, there's a person down the street who's had a cardiac arrest." So okay, fine. So we go running down the street, and in the distance, about 100 yards away under the lights of the driveway, you can see this body lying in the driveway. And there's a whole bunch of people standing around. One person's trying to do CPR, but the arms are kind of going like this, so obviously they don't know what they're doing. And there's a whole bunch of people standing around crying and screaming and things. So I run up, and there's a young girl. She's, I don't know, 17 or 18 years old, and she's blue. So I get down on my hands and knees, and I check to see if she's breathing. She's not breathing. And then I check to see if she has a pulse. And she did have a very faint pulse, so she had a respiratory arrest. And she needs somebody to ventilate her, otherwise she will have a cardiac arrest and die. So I'm thinking to myself, you know what, I'm in quarantine and I don't have any of the stuff we have in the emergency room, you know, the masks and all this. I had nothing. So I did the kiss of life. I did mouth to mouth on this young girl. And I'm thinking, as I'm going down to give her the first breath, I'm thinking, boy, the flight docs are going to love this. And I give her the first breath, and, you know, needless to say, we resuscitate her. And so I'm giving her mouth to mouth. The paramedics arrive, and between the three of us, I intubated her, and they started an IV. We gave her some medication, and by the time we were pulling into the hospital emergency department, she was already beginning to wake up and things. But yeah, that was quite an evening.
No kidding.
Yeah, but she made it. Which is
incredible.
Yeah.
But didn't you have like a moment of hesitation? You were like, I'm about to go to space, the thing I've dreamed about all my life? No. Like, not that you would ever do that, but was there in the back of your mind?
There was, but the way I remember it is I'm thinking, oh boy, I have to do mouth to mouth. This is the first time I've ever done it in my life for real. I mean, I've taught it for years and years and years, but honest to goodness, I had to do it for real this time. And I'm thinking to myself, truly, the flight docs, how am I going to explain this one? And you know, the funny part, what's not in the book, is before my second flight, okay, I'm in the park with the kids, and this kid falls off the monkey bars, and we hear from a distance of about, I don't know, 25 yards, crack. Oh. He breaks his elbow. So I go over saying, hi, you know, I'm Dr. Williams, I'm an emergency doctor. And if you break your elbow, it's not a good break because there's blood vessels there that carry the blood to your hand. He had what we call a supracondylar fracture, a fracture above his elbow, and it was displaced. We had no pulse in his arm.
Oh my goodness.
And that's a real true emergency. I actually had to reduce his fracture in the park with no anesthetic to save his forearm function. So anyway, I don't know.
Why
there's
is
something
that not
about
in the book?
I forgot the story. We better do it rewrite.
That's right. For the second edition.
Yeah,
we'll
second edition, we'll add that story
so
too.
Clearly it's good to hang around with you if you're about to go into space.
Well, yeah, it seems to be the case.
The girl actually, though, there's a kind of a postscript, which is that she survived, went to the hospital, and then she came to talk to you.
and then she came back. And that was really, it was very moving because it was the night before I went into the quarantine at JSC, where we actually have to move into the quarantine facility. But she came in with her parents, and she said, "Did you mind if I just come in and say hi?" And I said, "No, come on in." And we sat and talked. And you know, for me as a doctor, I'm just doing what I'm trained to do. But she said something that was really profound. She said, "You know what? I just want to thank you for saving my life." And believe it or not, I'd never had anybody say that before. And I've saved a lot of lives, but you know, I'd never had an opportunity to chat after you do it. So anyway, she said, thank you. And she said, you know, I never thought about becoming a doctor, but now that I realize that just with your knowledge, you can intervene and save somebody's life, that's really, really cool. So then she thought about becoming a doctor. I don't know if she ever did or not, but
wow.
Anyway, we kind of lost touch.
Still, that's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Okay, I think at this point, I have to ask you, what's it like to be in space?
Being in space is an unbelievable sense of freedom. It's an amazing opportunity as a person because you go to space representing humanity. We represent the human species. And don't take this the wrong way. I'm a very proud Canadian, but in space I'm human first. And you're there with cosmonauts, with astronauts from Europe, Japan, and the United States, and you realize that we're all in this together. It's an amazing experience. When you're outside doing a spacewalk, you look down at the surface of the planet. There's no lines demarcating countries. You know, there's nothing that says the border is here. You just simply look at the Earth and you recognize continents, you recognize countries by virtue of geography, but we are truly all in this together, and the planet's a really small planet. We orbit the Earth every 90 minutes, and I remember having this big epiphany on my second spacewalk. I'm riding the end of the Canadarm, and I'm looking at this incredible image of the Earth.
Riding the end of the Canadarm. Can you describe what that is?
Well, you got your foot in the foot restraint, and you're on the end of the robotic arm. And yeah, that's exactly, you took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, I just needed a lasso. It would have been cool. Anyway, I'm riding the arm and I'm looking at the Earth and I realize this is a 4.5 billion-year-old planet upon which the entire history of the human species has taken place. Everybody that I know, that I love, that I care about is on this planet. And then you begin to reflect about your life, let's just say, 80, 90, 100 years, whatever it may be, because we're living longer these days, but your life in the sense of cosmic time. I mean, cosmic time is just mind-bogglingly huge. So I felt like my life was this speck of sand on this infinite beach of life, which seemed a little depressing at the time. And then I realized that, the opportunity that we all have is to live our lives to the fullest, to not focus on leaving your legacy, but focus on living your legacy on a day-to-day basis. And that was an amazing epiphany. And then, of course, it's time to get back to work, right? So,
So as you're trying to maneuver a giant piece of space machinery, how fast are you going in space?
So we're traveling, compared to the Earth, 25 times the speed of sound, which is 8 kilometers a second, roughly 8 times faster than a rifle bullet. And relative to the space station, though, we're moving very, very slowly. So on Monday, David Saint-Jacques, who's in space right now on the space station, he's going to be doing a spacewalk. So tune in, you got to watch it. It's really, really cool. But when you tune in and you watch David kind of move an inch in like 3 minutes, you'll realize it's like watching grass grow, because we move really slowly in space. You don't want to get going fast, because it's really easy to get going and really hard to stop.
Definitely. You talk about the beauty of, obviously you had this epiphany, you're looking at the Earth, but you talked about the beauty of the sunsets too, or sunsets and sunrises.
Yeah.
How many did you see in a day?
So you see a sunset and a sunrise every 45 minutes. So if you like sunsets and sunrises, you got to go to space, because it's absolutely amazing. But being inside the space shuttle or the space station is really incredible. Being outside, you experience the warmth of the sun. And when it's nighttime, the temperatures can go down as low as minus 200 degrees Celsius. You don't feel it in your suit, because you don't actually have an active heater in your suit. Your body heat keeps you warm with all the layers of the suit. We have a heater in our gloves, an electric heater that we use because we're grabbing onto structures and things. But when the sun comes up, despite the temperature of your suit, you feel like you're being wrapped in this nice warm blanket. It's a weird sensation to describe, but you feel the warmth of the sun and the property of life. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but you feel actually alive when the sun comes up and you see the Earth beneath you and you feel warm again, and it's not that extreme black infinite void of nighttime space.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, you've done something that so few people have done. Do you pinch yourself and go, wow, like I've actually been to space? Like, part of the reason we're all here tonight is because you're the only one in this room, I would imagine, who's done that.
You never know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking around the crowd right now.
Yeah.
But do you like just kind of pinch yourself sometimes and go, holy mackerel?
There are moments, what I think is really cool. Think about dreaming. So when I was in space the first time, I actually had dreams about being on Earth. But I never had dreams about being in space until I had actually been in space. Now I have space dreams, which are really cool, because I can have a terrestrial dream one night, and then the next night I have a dream that I'm back in space doing a spacewalk, reliving that moment, and it's a really special moment. But in all sincerity, I wrote the book for a number of reasons. I truly believe that flying in space is a remarkable privilege, and it's really our responsibility to try and share the story with as many people as we can, which is why I'm here tonight, to be able to share really the experience of being in space, what it's like, the meaning of this for all of us as humans, understanding the human condition, and the fact that the best planet to live on in this solar system is the Earth. So we better take care of it. I actually wrote a book. I have 4 kids' books. My last kids' book is called Destination Space. There it is, Destination Space, living on other planets in the solar system. And at the end of the book, it's basically, yeah, it's all really good if you want to go live on Mars, but truly the best place to live is here.
I'm going to go back to before your second journey to space. I'm not going to ask about the kid with the broken elbow, which is an absolutely amazing story. But I want to talk about something that you talk about quite openly in the book, but you didn't really talk about openly at the time, which was your cancer diagnosis. Yeah. So tell us what happened first. Like, what was the diagnosis?
So it's a very tough time for me as an individual, I guess for us as a family. I was turning 50, which, is kind of an interesting birthday, right? Because if you figure you live to be 100, you've lived a half your life. It's kind of an interesting thing to think about. And I went in for my astronaut medical, and it turns out that I had cancer. And I lost everything. I lost my medical as an astronaut. I lost my medical as a pilot. And I remember going for surgery and going into the hospital, and after you go through all the admissions stuff and things, you know, I'm in the room and the nurse comes in and says, "Here's your gown, it opens up in the back." And I don't know how many thousands of times I've said, you know, "Here's your gown, it opens up in the back." But I'd said it before as a doctor. And somewhere between the nurse telling me, "Here's the gown, and it opens up in the back," and sitting there and then having to lie flat on my back, because when you're on the stretcher, you have to lie flat on your back. You know, you can't sit there with the bed rails down, you have to be flat. I went from being an astronaut doctor to being a patient. And I truly understood, you know, there's a big debate in healthcare right now. Should we use the word patient? People talk about, oh, we should call it people-centered healthcare. I don't know, I'm all for patient, because to me, the word patient means I'm not at my best. There's something wrong with me. That's why I'm in the hospital. And I need to be treated with compassion, with dignity, and with respect, because I'm vulnerable. And I truly understood what it was like to become a patient for the first time in my life when I was a patient. And you'll laugh about this, but I go for surgery, and surgery, it's a pain. I was up all night thinking about that.
That's good. Yeah.
Anyway, no, it's tough. It's really, really hard. So the next day, you know, I'm trying to get out of bed. The nurse is saying, so I'm walking around the ward with my IV pole, and I got tubes and all this stuff. And the cleaner's going, "Dave, you're looking good. Keep it up." And every day the cleaner was like my coach, and he'd be, you know, giving me the encouragement. But after 5 days, finally I got rid of most of my tubes and stuff. I had something that stayed there for a couple weeks after. But the nurse came in to take all this out, and she looks at me and says, "You're a doctor, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I am." She said, "You learn anything while you've been in here?" I said, "Yes, I have." And she says, "You will remember, won't you?" I say, "I promise I'll remember," and things. But you know, no one wants to be a patient, and I would not wish that on anyone. But it is important to understand that experience.
And the journey that you had then, just to physically get back into the shape to be able to go to space.
Yeah,
How the hell did you do that?
So I was supposed to be the commander of Nemo 7, an
right.
underwater mission, and I had my surgery at the beginning of August. The mission was halfway through September, and you know, it went through surgery. It didn't have any complications. The surgeon said he thought he got all the cancer and things, so it seemed positive. And then I remember going to the gym, and we have personal trainers to train us for spacewalks and things. So my trainer says to me, trainer's Corey, he's an amazing guy, says, "Okay, Dave, we're going to start here, and if you do everything that I tell you to do, I guarantee I'm going to get you back into shape." And he gives me a 2-pound weight. And you know, I used to be able to lift more than 2-pound weights, and I'm starting with this 2-pound weight, and every day was a journey, and it was really, really tough. The first time I went jogging, I felt like my insides were gonna kind of fall out. It was a really weird sensation. Anyway, I was able to get through all that. I got my medical back to fly both a short duration mission and a long duration mission, but I medically decertified myself from that underwater mission because I didn't want to put the mission at risk and the crew in jeopardy by having me that I could potentially have some issue that close after surgery. So I waited and turned down a 2-week mission underwater to ultimately become a commander of an 18-day mission in 2006. So, you know, it all worked out in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is and I know this because of another interview I saw you do, but you didn't really tell the people in your team
Not
and
at
everything
all,
what
no.
had been going on. So why write about it in the book? Why is it important for you to tell that story now about having cancer?
I think the reason why it's important is I am a doctor, and you would think that I would know better, but I use a phrase called the Cancer Club. And if anybody else is in the Cancer Club, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Nobody wants to be in the Cancer Club, but when you hear those words, do you remember what it's like? You have cancer. You think immediately all sorts of catastrophic things are going to happen. I actually thought I was going to die. Mm-hmm. Right? And you go from there to having to regroup and figure it out. And it's every day is a journey in regrouping and figuring it out. And the reason why I wrote about it in the book is because I thought, you know, this was going to be the end of my career as an astronaut. I was worried that I was actually not going to survive the whole experience and things. And I tried to read about it. I'm one of these people that loves books, so whenever I want to learn something, I go to books to find the answer. I couldn't find any book that really gave me the answers that I was looking for. So I put it in my book because one of the most important elements of life, I think, is understanding that adverse things happen and we have to figure it out. And working through that together as a family with my wife and my kids, it was a journey. But at the end of the day, it all kind of worked out, and I'm very happy to be here as a cancer survivor today.
Awesome. You can clap if you, yes, definitely.
Thank you. Thanks.
The first time you went into space was on Columbia.
Yeah.
Columbia, of course, a few years in between your two missions, blew up. What was it like to have been on a space shuttle and then to watch that space shuttle go, and your friends who had been on that mission? I don't mean to.
Yeah.
What was it like to just watch that happen?
So there are no words in the English language to really describe the magnitude of a tragedy like that. You know, I think we do have words like tragic and things, but the range of emotions that you feel, it's really, really, really tough. And I remember Saturday, it was in February 2003, February 1st, and Saturday morning around 9 o'clock in the morning, we're watching this on television, the space shuttle breaking up as it's re-entering the atmosphere above Lufkin, Texas, northeastern Texas. And I got a call from Rich Williams, who is the chief medical officer at NASA, and Rich and I worked together for 4 years. And he said, "Did you see what's going on?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going into Johnson Space Center. I'll call you when I get there." 6 hours later, I was in Lufkin, Texas, participating in the recovery. And it was really, really hard. Arguably, it was a bit easier for us in the field because we had stuff to do. The people that didn't really have a lot to do, I think it's a lot harder because then you're focused with the stark reality of the loss of 7 close friends and what that meant. But on the other hand, watching people respond to the disaster was a remarkable experience. We had volunteers come from all over the United States. And one in particular, there was this couple, I didn't ask them their age, they looked like they were in their late 70s, early 80s, who as soon as the vehicle was lost, they got in their car and they drove, I think from Oklahoma or something, to northeastern Texas. And I remember seeing them Sunday morning. And the husband says, "Yeah, we're here and we want to help." And I said, "Okay." They said, "Well, is there something we can do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. We have a place over here for volunteers. Go over there, speak to them, and we'll see what we can do." Later that day, I came back to the command center, and they were there sweeping the main lobby and cleaning it up. And they were just thrilled to be able to participate in this. And it's interesting how we as humans respond to this. I was in Houston when Katrina went through New Orleans, and we had 30,000 people living in the Reliance Stadium, and they created a hospital in the corner of Reliance Stadium, and they asked for any doctors and nurses, bring your license to prove that you're actually a doctor and a nurse, and we'll register you and you can, be part of the team in this hospital. So we did that, and you're walking up and down rows of people, and you're just simply saying, "Hi, I'm Dr. Williams. Do you have any medical issues?" And you had insulin-dependent diabetics without insulin, people who are hypertensive with no medications. I talked to one guy, he's sitting by like a post right by there. I said, "How are you doing? You look like you're in pain." He says, "Yeah, I'm having difficulty breathing." I said, "I'm a doctor. Just let me listen to your chest." He had a collapsed lung because he'd fallen during the evacuation, broken a bunch of ribs, which had punctured his lung, which had collapsed. And he went all the way from New Orleans to Houston with a collapsed lung until we diagnosed him and sent him into the hospital. Yikes. So it's remarkable how people come together. And you saw that, if you haven't seen the play Come From Away, you got to go see that about the response in Newfoundland during 9/11. How these individuals opened up their communities to all the people that were on board the jets that couldn't land in the United States. It's remarkable how these things happen.
I want to ask you about science. Science has driven both of the things in your life, medicine and also space. We seem to be living in an age where science is being attacked by some people. Are you worried about that, or?
I do worry in the sense that I think we need to be able to make data-driven decisions. You hear that when people talk about, in quote, global warming. Well, global warming can't be a reality because yesterday was like the coldest day in 25 years. It's the confusion between weather and climate, and there's quite a big difference between weather and climate and things. And I find I do get asked about the flat Earth, and that's an interesting question because, I mean, if you look at it looks flat, right? But I fly in the kinds of airplanes that go high enough that even in an airplane you can see the curvature of the Earth, notwithstanding being in space. The Earth really is round. But what's interesting is people are beginning to speak based on their life experience, that from their perspective they see the Earth as flat and they're convinced that the Earth is flat. And I think it's an opportunity for all of us to think about how we learn, how we share information, how we use scientific data to make data-driven decisions. And I think it's a great opportunity for those of us in areas of science to be able to communicate science in a manner that helps everybody understand what it is we do. And in neuroscience, so I'm going to speak neuroscience for a sec. This is so cool. My first mission was about how the brain adapts to being in space. I trained as a neuroscientist in an era when we believed that all the nerves in the central nervous system in the brain were connected to each other in a static manner, basically like the motherboard of a computer. And we were trained that the brain can never rewire itself. That's wrong. We now know that the brain can rewire itself, and that's called neuronal plasticity. It's like a motherboard of a computer rewiring itself under certain circumstances. And what's remarkable about that is if we can understand neuronal plasticity and then be able to use that clinically to help patients recover from stroke or help patients with other neurological diseases. So what we considered was impossible back in the 1970s is now actually something that's science fact. So with kids I say, from science fiction to science fact, and that's so cool to be able to think about.
Wow. I'm going to throw it over to you guys in just 1 second, but I'm going to ask one more question. So get your brains going and think about what it is you want to ask Dave. But the last question I'm going to ask is in the epilogue, you talk about your two worlds. And you say that they're very similar, that being an astronaut and being a doctor are both about trying to make the world a better place. What do you mean by that?
So a really good friend of mine is Rick Hansen. And Rick talks about people as being difference makers. And I go back to the time when I was struggling as a student and I had dreams about what I wanted to do, but I wasn't really sure if I'd be able to accomplish those dreams. But at the end of the day, all I really wanted to do was something of meaning. And what does that actually mean? I don't know what that means, because we all define what's meaningful in our own lives, and that's perfectly fine. But for me, meaning was basically helping people, continuing my passion for scientific exploration and things. And I think whether you're working as a physician, whether you're working as a research scientist, whether you're working as an astronaut, exploration, my definition of exploration, is relentlessly seeking knowledge with passion. And that, to me, brought together my clinical life as a researcher, my clinical life as a physician helping others, and my desire as an astronaut to further the quest for knowledge in space exploration to send humans farther and keep them in space longer.
Is there ever going to be a place for a short guy who's myopic?
Always.
Yes.
We should go. You want to go to Mars?
Yes!
Have I got a mission for you?
Excellent.
It's 3
It's one
years.
way.
Not one way. Do not sign up. Trust me, don't sign up for the one-way missions, okay? Well, something about coming back.
Yeah, the coming back I think would be the best part of it.